Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 57 of the Lorethrough. I'm excited to see you today, and let's get right to it. So we'll be heading southward along this road here in Caelid. And we have a lot to see, a lot of horrible, disgusting overgrowths. I have a weapon to demonstrate. There's a lone dog over here made of rot. I'm going to show off Moonveil. It's okay, I guess. I should probably show off its raw damage against one of these guys. Might as well. I might be able to get both of them. Yeah. And these guys have glaives and lots of arms, and they're not bug arms. Oh, and you can backstab them. But they're made of this horrible chitin. They have like a ton of, it looks like human limbs, but stretched and wrong. And then they still have these horrible bug faces. Almost lends one to believe that they might be a mutation of some kind. Almost like the Crimson Rot isn't just a simple rot, but rather something that attacks your cells on a fundamental level and changes them to fit their needs. Kind of reminds me of the Zerg, honestly, from StarCraft. Where it's a virus on the cellular level. I guess that's a silly way of putting it. And here we find the Ash of War Lifesteal Fist, which we saw Ensha use on his little bone fist weapon. I forget what these guys are guarding over here, but there's a little pocket. Yeah, there's a little pocket here of Redmane fellows. As I get domed. I'm not a huge fan of the Moonveil. It's okay. It's useful. Ooh. Let's take care of the wizards that are causing us trouble. So it seems interesting that these noble wizards are working with the Redmanes. It makes you wonder where these nobles come from. Do they come from Celia, perhaps? But they're not full-blown sorcerers. Dang, it's just so strong all the time. And it's reasonably fast. Is there anything else I should show off? I should show off the sleep sword. And as you can see, you'll fall asleep. And certain enemies have different sleep resistances. Not only how much status they need to endure, right? Can we crit this guy? Or is he just out? Yeah, he's just out. So not only do enemies have resistance in terms of how much sleep is required. I never grabbed that. If I recall, it's probably not even worth my time, but I'm going to check it anyways. Goodness, I can't even finish my thought without getting interrupted by the video game. So, say an enemy takes 100 points of sleep. That's the resistance, right? But there's some enemies that, even though it takes them 100 points to sleep, the stage of sleep they fall into can be vastly different. So this guy falls completely asleep. And the knight just gets stumbled here, see? Whew. Doing that spin. I need to show that off, actually. I'll do it now. So the Lion's Claw is an Ash of War we got last time. Looks like this, just like the Knight did. And it has a lot of hyper armor. You can and see that Knight, this soldier was asleep the whole time. So, oh, another war pick. Nice. I'll add it to the pile. Okay. Right, we're working our way over here. This was this area that I'm in over here is just northeast of the Gale Castle, essentially. And we can see that there's a bunch of dog monsters over here, as well as that tank over there. You can see a little sliver of it. I wanted to get up this cliff over here, or get down to the cliff that was formerly above me. and find out what the noble's corpse was holding. This noble that's overlooking this little lake of rot. Somber stone 4. Not bad. Helpful. Worth grabbing, in my opinion. I don't think Ashes of War tend to have lore on them, but let's look at Lifesteal Fist just in case I am wrong. Ash of War grants an armament, the occult affinity, and the following skill. Lifesteal Fist. Skill that demonstrates mastery of the art of controlling vital energies. A slow, controlled punch with an energy-infused fist that renders foes unconscious and steals their HP. Only effective against foes of human build. And by human build, it essentially means tarnished. I think there's very few other situations where it works on a human-shaped enemy. Mostly tarnished. And I've seen people do some crazy stuff with it where they'll have a high-end dexterity build with a good amount of intelligence. They'll imbue their claw weapon with enchant armament or scholar's armament, whatever that spell's called. Yeah, scholar's armament. And then they'll use Lifesteal Fist, and it'll do a crazy damage multiplier. So here we are at the Astray from the Caelid Highway North. And here there are a lot of swords here. Lots of swords. In fact, this may even be more swords than we saw when we entered Caelid for the first time with Godfrey's final conquest. So let's see what it says. The Battle of Aeonia. Radon and Melania locked in stalemate. Then the scarlet rot blooms. So I wonder, given where this is perched, if that is the bloom it's referring to. Because that seems to be the largest bloom in the area. And there's a lot of rot about on these trees, right? But that seems like the most prominent feature. It seems to be in the middle of, well, I think we'll come to call it the Aeonia Swamp in time.
Ah, welcome, dear customer. Yes, right this way. Right this way. Welcome, valued customer. Please, buy something. I'm hungry.
So, let's buy... So he sells these boluses for a pretty penny. 2,500 each. He's certainly trying to gouge us, right? But he also sells poison bone darts, which are very nice. He also sells these stones, and he sells these Aeonian butterflies for very expensive. But more importantly, he sells fire arrows. And the fire arrows are a little pricey compared to normal arrows, but they give you access to fire. So a lot of things here in Caelid are very weak to fire. And so it seems worth it that if you're using a short bow of any variety, even as a sidearm or just on occasion, just to have fire on you, if this is your only means of getting it, put this on, like your bow, and use that. Because lots of things take tons of bonus fire damage in this zone. And you get the Flame the Red Mane's Ash of War, so you can put fire on a weapon, right? But you're mostly relying on pots and greases until you find this merchant, it feels like. Or spells. You might have incantations. If you do have incantations, that is also very nice. So we will buy a handful of these to show them off. They're pretty simple in concept. But essentially, what they are is... I probably didn't need to remove those greases. That was silly of me. But it's kind of like the explosive stone and the explosive stone clump, as well as the glintstone scrap and large glintstone scrap. They're these throwables that come in tiers. And the first one is just a single rock that poisons. And the upgrade version is a whole slew of them. Right? And I actually like keeping the poison stone clump on my bar when I'm doing some PvP, especially at lower levels. Because it gives you a nice avenue for dealing poison to somebody when you may not have an infusion. Getting to this swamp in Caelid's not too difficult, though you do have to spend a good amount of runes to have as many as you may like to have. Oh, I need to go farther down on the slope here. But because the poison rock clump hits multiple times, I've found it's pretty good for knocking people off ladders. It only takes 1 or 2 throws, and they are off that ladder because of how many times it hits them. And generally, if you can hit them with 2 clumps, and most of the clump hits, I've seen it poison people relatively easily. That may not be so true at higher levels. Alright, so this grace is called the Aeonia Swamp Shore. Okay, so I thought we would learn that it was called the Aeonia Swamp Shore. And now we understand that Aeonia seems to be at least this basin down here, if not the swamp itself. But let's chat up this ghost. Let me see it, if only one last time, your splendid blade dancing amongst the scarlet rot. So he's probably talking about Melania. She seems to be a more nimble swordsman. However, perhaps he is a hidden Radon fanboy and he's looking for them big, meaty, chunky cleavers. Who knows? You decide, fair viewer. Here we have land squirts, but they're covered in rot and they're huge. They're enormous and they're gross. And they just spewed everywhere. And just like normal land squirts, you can poison them yourself and they will detonate. And I've never actually tested what kind of poisoning you do. It might be any poison for any land squirt, or maybe you have to match up the type with the land squirt. I don't quite recall. Okay, so here we have a ruin that we will be exploring a bit of. I don't know how that dog missed me that many times. That was kind of a small miracle. Pest glaive. Okay, I knew there was something else I needed to read off. So the pests that we've been fighting have this weapon here. Glaive made from a hard, sharpened shell, wielded by pests who emerge from the swamp of Aeonia. Slightly increases non-physical damage negation. Though men might recognize the keen intellect of the pests evidenced by this spear's uncanny design, it will never be understood by them. So it's another thing beyond human ken, much like the Beastman cleaver or the Crystallian weapons, right? So it seems that there's things supposedly just beyond human understanding. If we take a look at our resistances, magic is like 20.8, fire is 23.1, lightning's at 19, holy's at 20.1. If we equip the pest's glaive, we can see all those things went up by like a couple percent points. It doesn't seem even. Maybe it is a solid 2%. It's somewhere around 2 or 3%. I'm sure somebody has the actual number. You could stack 2 of these and get almost 4 or 6%. Which is a little silly, but hey, if you need a lightweight halberd with a modest stat requirement and has access to the overhead swing, why not give it a go? Okay. So let's do something a little different. I'm going to show off how useful fire is against these fellows. And I put Flame of the Redmanes on the Greatsword because that gives me access to the fire enchant. And sure enough... Oh, wow. Why did I pick Greatsword versus Dog? It's not dead. It's not dead. Okay. Oh, wow. That's a lot of them. We're going to hit him with one of these. They're skittish things, and I hate them very much. Get a faded leaf flower from them. Oh, we need so many faded leaf flowers. Flame of the Redmanes does not have a whole lot of hyper armor. It seems fairly easy to interrupt. It seems directly linked to how much armor you do have. Another pest glaive. I don't know why I farmed for it earlier. That's okay. Rot grease. Oh. We have one of these little steeples here that lets us summon friends, so we could have brought Lutel along, but that's okay. Just trying to show off how neat the Greatsword is. I like the Greatsword. Unfortunately, also everybody who's ever read the manga Berserk also loves the Greatsword, and you see it everywhere. It's very popular. Because it's the biggest Greatsword, it weighs the most. I think. It's not the heaviest colossal weapon. There's a couple that are heavier, but I think of all the colossal Greatswords, specifically that class, I think it's the heaviest. And might even be matched in weight by one other? There's only one that comes to mind. There could be another one. Has substantial stumble. I think everybody should have a heavier weapon on their build. It may not be something this heavy. Perhaps the heaviest weapon you can get is a great hammer or maybe a halberd. So in this crypt here, there's a ton of little baby pests. And I hate these things so much. And they're just everywhere in this little crypt. And they all have ranged attacks that conveniently shoot over. Just taking all this free damage. I should probably be bringing a better, faster weapon. Because I have so much end lag on the attack. Therefore, I'm prime bait for getting walloped. And down here, we find my favorite version of the Moonveil, not the Moonveil, the Meteoric Ore Blade. So I consider this weapon a far better pick than the Moonveil, just in terms of style alone, right? So the Moonveil scales primarily with intelligence and does fairly well with dexterity. The Meteoric Ore Blade, on the other hand, seems to be primarily a strength weapon with an int requirement. If that makes sense. It has gravitas, which is, it's okay. But it has this overhead heavy attack that hits like a bus. And there's only a couple... I'm actually having trouble remembering if any other katana has this specific overhead, actually. I don't think even the regular Uchi has this. But my mind's blanking. I don't know if there's any other katana that has that particular overhead. This is the one that comes to my mind, but we probably will upgrade this since we're doing a strength intelligence build. Why not? It'll be fun. I think I need to go to the edge of the swamp to the north. I think that's what needs to happen here. We'll hit him with the unleveled meteor blade. Here we go. So somewhere over here in the swamp, there it is. There's this guy. I don't think I touched the last two, and I should have, but I didn't. But it creates a little guy who walks through the swamp, and he takes the long way, right? And he gets you in all sorts of trouble with all the wildlife. Where is he? What? Did he disappear because I got on my horse? There he is. Okay, he just disappears and reappears intermittently. So we follow him, and he takes this long way. Oh, wow, he is slow. How miserable. Well, at least I can take some pot shots at these darn skeeters. Well, not if they're moving that much. I may not be able to. There we go. There's one down. Horrible monsters. Where'd the ghost go? Either way, he normally walks through the swamp and he just makes his way to the cave. That's it. That's all he does. He just makes his way to the cave. It's not that impressive. It's not that inspiring. You're better off just heading to the cave. If you probably already know about it. Oh, there he is. Of course, it's been a fun little mental exercise for me, recalling and thinking about what it was like to not know every detail of the game. Not that I know every detail, but not to know so much about the game. And recall that feeling of when you're first playing the game and you don't know what's around every corner. You don't know what you can find later on. Stuff like that's useful for pointing out caves. Don't get me wrong. Especially on a blind playthrough, you should look for them and go where they lead you. Most of the time, it's somewhere that has neat stuff. Alright, we have a rune arc. I don't need to be using the greatsword anymore. What could we be using? I kind of like the heavy iron greatsword. So we will do that. There's a rat. Surprised there's not more than one. Is this a dark cave? This cave, I think, is only dark briefly. We'll put up with it. But I should get my starlight spell soon. I'll throw it on for next episode. There might be a dark cave later. This one's not that dark. It's not that dark of a cave. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Stop stressing out, Mom. I go spelunking in dangerous caves all the time. So, going ahead in this cave, it comes to a dead end, and there's a strange divot in the floor. Decoy ahead. Which is a funny little thing to worry about messaging, because this is the way forward. You can't advance without falling down this. Ah, I botched it. You can jump to the other side. Do see these bodies. Interesting that they're already ragdoll-able. Or they're in their ragdoll state. Hear horrible groaning noises. We see these cages. Full of fiery boys. Kind of interesting that you can still plink with jump attacks. There we go. It's not necessarily worth killing all of them here, but oh well. Thinning them out's probably not a horrible idea either. So here we have this little building underground. We can't open it from this side. But we see at the top, if we're paying attention, because it's a nice breakup in the scenery, we see a lever. Ah, delayed attack. Well, I guess we'll just bop him. Rather anticlimactic, but oh well. Okay. We'll buff this for funsies. Get that tasty bonus damage. There's one more here. There he is. And we have lots of cages, groaning men. And I believe the name of the cave is just Jail Cave, right? I don't know why people were jailed here, at least not yet. There's all sorts of kinds of cages, and it seems kind of a chore to haul them all in here. Though they wouldn't have had to go down the drop that was the false drop that we had to go down. They would have just taken a door, allegedly. They probably had the key, unlike us. We're an intruder in these parts. Poor militiamen don't stand a chance. Not against ye old iron greatsword and lion's claw, even though I don't even need lion's claw for these fools. Okay. So I believe walking up here... Yeah, there's a handful of rats. Take care of those. Golden rune. Turtleneck. I should read the description of the ore blade. I don't think I did that. Oh, you're alive? I thought y'all's was dead. Okay. Katana forged from meteoric ore to dispatch life forms born of falling stars. Deals magic damage. The blade is weighty, known to deliver slashes of such ferocity that the impact is said to resemble the crashing of a falling meteor. And that's them referencing the overhead heavy attack. But it seems interesting that they say it's designed to kill a specific type of enemy. Life forms born of falling stars. So if we see anything born of a falling star, I think I'll try out the katana and see how it does. I'll have to upgrade it first. And oh boy, do I have to upgrade so many darn weapons in this playthrough. But that's what I get for wanting to show off as much as I can. Which is fine. I'm not complaining. It's just kind of a fact of reality. So going down here, we can open this. We have this angry militiaman. That poor critical. Or sorry, the poor militiaman after that critical. 1700 damage is no laughing matter. Goodness. And let's see what's in this treasure chest. A somber 5. So that's kind of worth coming to this cave for. Somber 5. Because a +5 weapon, well, it's like a +12.5 standard. So that's pretty good. pretty worthwhile. So now we get to pull the crank and kind of get to do the dungeon again. And I feel like I should be using a faster weapon for this part. We'll try this bad boy. This may not be the right kind of faster, but I'm hoping it combines damage and speed. Okay, so this particular way is the way back up. And it looks like it opened the door at the top. So that would be the way back to the entrance if we needed to for some reason. Killing all these fellows before they have a chance to explode. Because we've already seen enemies like that. Pillory shield! Yay! Let's take a look at that. Pillory made to punish serious felons, used as a shield. Though made of wood, made of good, sturdy wood, it is only a makeshift tool and performs as such. Perhaps due to its use as a device with which the guilty were made to endure prolonged suffering. It raises vitality. It does raise vitality, but it's almost being speculative about why the heck it does that. Which is kind of funny to me. If I recall, I think vitality is the stat that governs your resistance to death blight, making it not that useful. It's pretty easy to avoid death blight from all of the enemy sources that deal it, and from other players, they can only deal 2 means of death blight. There's a weapon that can buff itself, and we'll talk about that when we find it. And then there is an incantation. No, it's a sorcery. And they both build up death blight so incredibly poorly that they are a non-threat. If people use it in PvP, it's almost a waste of an action. Which feels bad, you know, it's a whole status effect. I whiffed all those swings. The dear viewer is going to be sore upset with me. Alright. I tried. I got a lot of them, though. In here's the interesting part, though. Wakazashi, Stone Sword Key, and the Golden Rune. Wakazashi, I think, is an overlooked weapon, for the most part. It's very interesting, though, because if you put a katana in your main hand, say the meteoric blade, and a katana in your left hand, say Moonveil, it could be any two, right? They're in the same family, right? You get the paired attack pattern. If you put the Wakazashi in your offhand, even though it is a dagger class weapon, you still get the paired attacks. And I don't know if you get it if you have it in your main hand. Nope. For some reason, if you have the Wakazashi in your main hand, your left hand will act independently. But it's still interesting. Another notable thing about the Wakazashi is that it is one of the higher base damage daggers in the game that I am aware of, right? I think in terms of raw number. It's also one of the heaviest, so the Chinkadea? Quesadilla. I'm going to call it the Quesadilla. Cinkadea. I should really have looked that up. Oh well. So I'm going to call it the Cinkadea because that looks like how it's spelled, right? Weighs 3.5, which is pretty hefty for a dagger. In fact, I believe there are straight swords that weigh less than that at 3. Probably just the short sword, but still. And then the Wakazashi weighs 3. So weight seems like a telltale sign of weapons within a class for almost how well their base damage will be, right? Of course, you should consider things like moveset and scaling a little bit. But the Wakazashi seems to be a dexterity weapon that does fairly well with strength, if I recall. And it has really high base damage, especially against things like the Misericord or the regular dagger or any of the other daggers, right? It doesn't have an extra critical rating just like the Cinkadea, but I think they have their own purpose, right? And what some people will do is they will stick a weapon like... Oh. Do I not have it on me? Did I put it away? I might have. Oh, there it is. Zweihander, right? So people will take things like the Zweihander and they'll combo it with a light weapon like the dagger. And the dagger's fairly darn fast. You don't get much faster in terms of a weapon, right? And they'll do a poke and a slash, and that, I believe, can combo a lot of the time, right? And it gives you a means of getting a little extra oomph in there. And the Cinkadea is great if you're doing that in a strength kind of capacity, because it'll do the most in terms of strength, right? But if you're using any other type of build, You can put the Wakazashi in that same place, right? You could do this on a dex build. You could do it on a magic build or a faith build just by changing the infusions of the weapons. And the Wakazashi will hit the hardest as a dagger, and it comes with bleed, so why not? Okay. I probably shouldn't have gone on that tangent. I just looked at the timer. We'll quickly rush and finish the dungeon. How's that sound, dear viewer? Thank you for putting up with my shenanigans. And I promise that prolonged monologue was not just so I could regain some HP with the talisman. I can drink a flask. I can afford it. I can afford a flask, I promise. I'm not broke. You're broke. Stop telling me I'm broke. Okay. Found a golden rune. Did I even read the description of the Wakazashi after all that? Short sword with a tempering pattern on the blade, a weapon unique to warriors of the lands of Reeds. Of the land of Reeds. Afflicts target with blood loss. These swords are considered auxiliary weapons, yet one man is known to wield this weapon in his left hand while using a full-size katana's right, a demonic swordsman only known as Okina, or Okina. And the nice thing, though, is that Okina is not a one-off referenced character. We will see signs of him again. Okay. Oh, I did this a little late. So here we have a duelist, right? Probably from a Colosseum. And we learned from the serpent claw, right, that the bronze serpent is a sign of Colosseum duelists. And sure enough, this fellow, if we were to look at his hands and his legs, it looks like he's wrapped up in snakes. Mostly his arms, I think. If his leg armor has those patterns, it's hard to say. And the interesting thing is that he has a unique helmet. We saw a guy like this, I think wielding hammers, in Limgrave, right? And there's two variants of this enemy in terms of their helmets. There's more than that if you count weapons or colorations, but in terms of helmets, there's these guys who have the plain version of the helmet, and there's another version that has a helmet that's covered in snakes. This doesn't seem to be one of them. But this guy seems to be put down here because he was a more dangerous enemy. So dangerous, in fact, it seems... Oh, I didn't even know you could backstab these fellows. That they left his weapon on him and just tossed him in this pit to molder. That tasty build-up. That probably wasn't necessary, but I felt like doing it. Why are you using the Reduvia? Aren't you a strength magic build? Yes, but I just wanted to... I'm going to show off how easy it is to bleed a certain enemy later on. Not this episode, next episode. Okay. So, the Colosseum fellow there seems to be... Well, he's from the Colosseums. He's a gladiator of types. He's got snakes on him, and the snakes brand him as an enemy of the Erd Tree. That's something we've already learned in previous item descriptions. Out here, we see a couple simple gravestones, which is interesting, to say the least. And a glowstone, right? And I don't think we see gravestones like this anywhere else. It's almost like he might have fashioned them, the fellow trapped in the cave. Which is funny, because this is totally a survivable fall. It's almost like he was willing to just stay here. Maybe he understood his sentence. Maybe he agreed with it. We don't know much about him. But he seemed frenzied by the time we ran into him. We find the Blade of Eokide. I think that's how that's said, and we'll take a look at it. Treasure Sword of Eokide, a lesser long-vanished domain. The copper coloration is not to be confused for rust, but is a conduit for its wielder to move it by their will alone. Swords of Eokide dance through the skies. And sure enough, if we do the Ash of War, which I'm glad it still lights up even though we don't have the requirements for it, it's very reminiscent of the bell-bearing hunters we found already. Because we fought two of those bad boys. But this is the straight sword version. We get the great sword version much later. It's an okay weapon. I like it. If you need to get multiple hits to build up a damage boost, because there's items that increase your damage with consecutive hits, this is a great pick. It is primarily a dex weapon with an arcane requirement, though I'm pretty certain upgrading both will do fairly well for its damage. So, fairly balanced, a neat little weapon. It makes me sad that it's a magic damage weapon, but it's an arcane dex weapon, so I can't see us using much of this until we are severely overleveled. But that should be it for today. I thank you for joining me. It's been a good it was a good episode. I had fun. Not a whole lot in terms of lore, but that's kind of how early parts are going to be when we first get to a zone. Is we have questions, we wonder, we explore, and we eventually answer them. So, thank you again, and goodbye.